After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and knight c3, the 3 knights game is on the board. Black plays the Gothic Gambit f5. In the previous video we went through pawn takes f5. There's going to be other videos as well with bishop to b5 idea, some pseudo Spanish. We're going to see much more stuff. Anyway, in this video we're going to go through one of the main lines. White playing d4 right now. Okay, we proceed by taking the pawn in e4. And now two options we're going to go through. Knight takes in e4 or knight takes in e5. Let's very briefly mention this crazy and stupid thing that sometimes they play, which is pawn takes pawn ignoring the knight. Don't be scared of this gambit, it's a stupid thing, it doesn't even have a name. Pawn takes knight, you're up a piece, and after queen f3, don't take the pawn in here because then the knight gets pinned and it's a bit annoying. The best move now is d5. In case you get taken, you can keep developing, you can develop the bishop and then the knight. And that's the most accurate way to continue. You might notice that this pawn is attacked twice. If white takes with the queen, remember you're up a piece, you're just trading everything. If white takes with the knight, then knight to d4 attacks the queen, also threatens the c2 pawn, winning the rook. And well, when the queen moves away from the defense of the knight, you can take the knight. So even if queen plays queen e4, saving the queen and also saving the knight for the moment, you still play knight takes e2, winning material. When the queen takes back, you take back. That's it. There's just absolutely nothing for white. So don't be scared of that gambit. So from the start, let's go through the two main moves. And only moves that make sense. Okay, so f5, d4. Okay, you take here. And now, white knight takes in e5. Black now continues with bishop to b4. The idea is not only to pin the knight, but also to take it. That's how we want to continue. Let's see two options here. One of them is the move that you're probably thinking about it now, which is the very reason why white played the setup d4 with the knight taken in e5, d4 supporting the knight, whilst putting attack over g6 and f7 for the arrival of the queen. So let's look at this move first of all. Queen h5, check, nothing to worry, g6, attacking the queen. And after the thematic sacrifice knight g6, just play knight f6, attacking the queen. So obviously now any discovered check with the knight is bad because you will be taking the queen and there's no double checks available. So after the only move, queen h4, still threatening a rook. Black plays rook to g8, and now there's double attack on this piece. The knight will have to move. So after knight back to e5, it looks like a good position for white, but in reality, black takes in d4 now with an attack on c2. Black is winning. We're going to look at two moves now, but black is winning no matter what. One of the moves will be king to d1, stopping us from going to c2 in the first place. Okay, d6. The white knight is trapped. Can't go anywhere without being taken for free, except one square, which is c4. So white is forced to play knight c4. Okay, black now plays bishop to g4, check, and it's game over. What can happen here? Well, if this gets covered with f3, you can just take it for free. You got so many attackers over f3, you're going to be winning, you're going to be making a fork to the rook as well. If white does anything else, like, I don't know, bishop blocks, right? Knight f5 traps the queen. So pay attention to the knight f5 possibility. That's why it's called the knife f5. And even in this position after bishop g4 check, even if king to d2, still e3 check, and king's got nowhere to go that makes sense. With king e1, you'd still be running into the same problems, knight to c2, but you still have also the option of knight f5. So it depends on how you want to continue this. So obviously king takes e3 doesn't work because knight f5 wins the queen. Also because it's check, taking the pawn in e3 doesn't help. This is even worse because knight e4 is like a checkmate coming in minimum 13 moves. You can also just take the queen with your queen. It's up to you, but you got a forced mate coming. So let's do it from the start so that we start familiarizing with how this works. Okay, f5, d4, main move. Okay, take, and we're looking at the variation knight takes in e5. Okay, bishop to b4 is the move. And don't worry about queen h5 check because g6 attacks the queen, knight sacrifice. Okay, knight f6 attacks the queen, queen has to move. Rook to g8 attacks the knight, knight has to move. And now you take this pawn in d4, and that's a tremendous attack. Now earlier we went through king to d1 and everything that happens next. What happens after this move? Bishop to g5, putting double attack over the knight in f6, threatening bishop f6, very strong move also because it will trap our queen. Well, I mean, we will have to play bishop e6, e7, but it's a terrible game. And the white player is choosing to ignore this knight c2 fork, obviously because this move seems to be doing more. In fact, look at what's going to happen now. Black takes the bishop. Boom. It's an incredible move. And also the beginning of an incredible line. Queen takes back, and now bishop takes knight with check. Pawn takes back, knight c2 check. king moves, knight takes rook. This is just getting started. Our king side is completely devastated. White's queen side is also devastated. Our king does have the right to castle, but it's just apparently never going to happen. White doesn't have the right to castle, but it looks like he can have a better development. He only moves this bishop, and then the rook is good to go. It's not like white is better. White is absolutely not better. Black is winning here, but it gives a weird impression. We're going to look at two moves then. One of them is bishop to e2, which is the best move by white. The other one is bishop to c4, which is also a good idea, but it gets punished. Bishop to c4, obviously threatening bishop to f7 or knight to f7. Well, d5 has to happen. Remember, this queen is powerless, even though she's so close to our king, because our knight, the best piece on the board, our beloved knight, is attacking pretty much all the squares that our king needs to be defended in order to prevent infiltration. After d5 and bishop check, remember that we're up a piece, so bishop b3 here, if anything that favors allows us to swap pieces, that would be good for us anyway. So after bishop to b5, the line keeps getting crazier. c6, which is crazy because there's two attacks. So knight c6, and we don't care. We go for it. Pawn takes, bishop takes, giving this to the opponent. And now the line continues with king to f7. We don't even bother playing bishop to d7 with the idea of going back to a8. Obviously because white has an attack on this knight. So we prefer to play king to a7 because, you know, we care about knights so much. So bishop takes rook now. And we are queen, bishop, knight, knight against queen, bishop, rook. With 4 pawns against 5. So it looks like a crazy game where everything can happen. But we're actually just winning. Completely winning. Position evaluated around -4 or -5. I don't really remember at this point. Black's best move is queen to a5. The idea is to infiltrate. There's lots of squares that we're attacking close to the opponent king. Engine moves by white will not be enough to save the white player from this situation. Queen d2, best move. Queen a4 check. And now obviously going to e2 will run into bishop a6. Very unpleasant move to meet because it will lead to checkmate. Not that far. King to c1. This crazy line continues with the final blow. Knight to b3 check. Of course, you're making a fork to these two, so white has to take, but now queen a1 check, king moves, queen takes the rook, and now the best move by white will be bishop takes d5. Of course, we don't want to take because this will allow the infiltration of the queen and probably a perpetual maybe. It's risky, so king to g6 is the best move, and now that's it. We're going to close the line here. We're up a piece. White's got more pawns, but these pawns are going to fall one by one. White's push. Okay, well, first of all, there's no way to save any of these pawns at the same time. So after c4, we're going to look at this idea, the idea of pushing this passed pawn. Queen takes here, c5, queen takes here. Just don't worry about it. c6, and now bishop to f5. We're going to close the line here. Positions like -10. This pawn isn't going anywhere. You're up a piece, winning endgame. So in this position, earlier we went through bishop c4 and everything that happens next, but d5 is good for black, very good for black. So bishop e2, black plays queen to e7, and after white's idea bishop h5, which was the whole point of playing bishop e2, well, also to develop bishop h5 check, knight takes, queen takes with check, and now king to f8. There's nothing here. If white develops the rook by playing king d2 with an attack on this knight, and also it looks like the knight is trapped, black plays d6, and we're just fine here. Because we're going to be taking the white knight, and even if the knight just moves, let's say knight g4, then queen e6, and when the rook takes our knight, we can take this one, we're up a piece. So you might argue, after d6 attacking the knight, what if knight to c4 gives the white player a better chance? No, because you just play the same move, queen e6. And you don't have to worry about queen h7 making skewers and so on, because after the queen takes the knight, it can go back to g8. And this is now game over. Black just wins the endgame. The knight moving away once again is not going to help because this just allows queen a2 check, protecting the knight. So you can take it from here. And one more thing in this position, after king f8, we went through the idea of king d2 to attack a knight. What happens after queen to f5 check? Okay, king to g8, queen to g4 check, and now queen to g7. And here there's nothing. It looks like maybe the white player will be able to finally recapture that piece. Queen g7, king g7, and now king to d2 with an attack on the knight. Okay, d6, attack the knight. And when the knight moves, let's say knight c4, bishop e6, attack the knight. knight to e3, and now we take the pawn in a2. And we don't care about the rook taking in a1 because we're winning. So that knight was going to be lost no matter what, but at least now we're better developed, and we're going to return the bishop back to e6. We're up 2 pawns, position evaluated minus 350, so this was black playing the best moves in such a position, so black is still going to win the endgame. Let's make a recap and go through the other move we had to go through. So knight c3, f5, okay, d4, we take the pawn. And after knight e5, as mentioned, we play bishop b4. Okay, so earlier we went through the whole queen h5 plan and the crazy line that happens next. What happens after the bishop gets attacked immediately? This is the best thing that can be done by white. Okay, take the knight. Pawn takes back. Knight to f6. Reaching the natural place where it belongs. Just like a Fiat 500, parked in front of the emergency sign that says do not block in the streets of Italy. And here we're going to look at 2 options. Bishop c4 and knight takes c6. How to take that? Let's start with knight c6. Okay, we take with the d pawn. This could be a good idea for white. Let's look how to deal with this setup, because white now is interested in opening the game. White didn't want us to play a move like d5, c6 and close the center. Although this game can never really be that closed. But if he closes the center, then maybe these 2 bishops will be penalized. In this moment, we don't have the bishop pair and our opponent does. So what's the compensation about it? We'll see. Bishop to c4 stops us from castling. Also, we can't play d5. So it looks like this is a good game for white, but in reality, bishop to g4 is the thematic move that does a lot. And now, well, f3 is kind of pointless. Although, just like every time I show something that I call pointless, I end up showing it for real. So let's go ahead. Pawn takes, and now queen takes here. Should I show this? Nah, come on. I mean, you know that you can take the queen, right? Because the bishop is worth 3 points and the queen is worth 9. So pawn takes back is just super ugly. Queen e7 check. Of course, queen e2 means that this pawn will be free to be taken, and I don't see much point in something like that. If king to f2, this is game over straight away. Knight e4 check. Pawn can't really take the knight because bishop will take the queen. King will have to move. Well, king going to a light square, for example f1, just allows us to play bishop to f1. It's a deadly move. We're going to see how to exploit that in a second. King going to g1 means that we're going to play queen f6. And again, white can't take the knight because the bishop will take the queen. And if the bishop is taken, queen f2 is mate. And in this position, a king g2 doesn't work because bishop h3. You might have seen something similar in the previous videos. Another sacrifice. King takes will be met by knight f2. Excellent position. So if instead king goes back to g1, for instance, then you simply long castle. Boom. Completely careless of the knight being taken. Because it looks like now this is possible. But queen e4 now threatening queen g2. Queen to d2 stops that for the moment. Rook d to f8 is the best move. Stops the white player from playing queen to f2 with the idea of developing the bishop and the rook and so on. Black now is threatening to play queen to g4, which is checkmate to follow very soon. And this is all unstoppable because bishop e2 is not possible since you will leave g2 unguarded. So let's make one more recap and we can talk about the remaining line. f5, d4, you take, knight e5, bishop e4, and the white player is attacking our bishop immediately. Okay, take, and now knight to f6. So let's more time at this line. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop to c4. This is met with bishop to g4. Very strong move. White shouldn't want to try to ruin everything by playing f3, so queen to d2, saving the queen and the integrity of the pawn structure. Black plays queen to e7, and after castling, bishop goes back to e6. The idea is, of course, to remove the bishop pair from our opponent, because this is what I think in chess. If I don't have the bishop pair, I have to take it away from my opponent, which is the same philosophy I have in life. If I suffer, other people must suffer. And whatever the bishop will do, we will be able to swap. So let's say after a bishop takes and queen takes back, how to take it from here? Well, this is now an open endgame. It's just too many things that can happen. I mean, not too many in reality, but the way to take it from here is try to understand what's going on. And then, well, basically you're going to castle. The rook will be on an open file, so you can start doubling up the rooks. And the opponent bishop is not going to be not that very good bishop unless white will be able to play a move like c4, but it's never possible because your queen will attack it. So let's make an example. If bishop to b2, trying to be on a good diagonal, you castle long, put pressure on d4, and c4 is just not possible because white will just lose a pawn and there's no compensation. A move like rook f to e1 with the idea of doubling up on the isolated pawn could be an idea of the white player, but black plays rook d to e8, putting more defense over this, rook to e2, rook h to f8. So if this endgame in this specific setup that I've kept for the end of this video is the most boring, there's a reason. The reason is that this is white playing the absolute best moves available, and your advantage now here is like -2, so black is still better, but is of course less sharp and less exciting than the previous lines I've showed. But this is to assume your opponent will play like stockfish and not like any other fish. Let's see this idea now. f3 is exploiting the pin. The idea might be to put the pawn into the center. So queen to d5 is the best move now, get out of the pin. And white's best move is to take the pawn. And now, surprisingly, queen to b5. Well, we're attacking the bishop and we're threatening to just place the knight into a very, very good square. After rook to b1, defending the bishop, knight takes e4, and after queen to e1, these are best moves, but they only have a symbolic meaning. The idea is like try to understand what to do. Like it makes sense for white to play like that, of course, and it makes sense for you to understand the patterns behind such a game. Here there's double attack on the knight, and the queen is also defending the rook, meaning that now the bishop in fianchetto might move with an attack on your queen. Don't worry about it, play knight to d6. You're happy to swap everything because the name of this channel is Endgame Strategies. Now we're threatening to win material, so after rook e8, rook takes back, the queen must move. After queen to f1, the best move by black, and we will close the video, will be queen to e2. The idea is that if we get taken, we can take back with development of the rook on the second rank, black rook on the second rank, money in the bank. Position is won unless black wants to give us activity or give up the pawn in c2, it depends. But the last mention of this video is that after a3 attacking the bishop, bishop takes knight, pawn takes back, knight to f6. Now instead of knight takes c6, we're going to go through bishop to c5. How to deal with this move? Well, you know what to do, d5. This is the best move. And after bishop e5, double attack on the knight. How to continue? Castle. We ignore that double attack and we go on with development like Paul Morphy. What happens now? Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. And can you believe the position evaluates as if black was like up a piece? Black plays rook to b8 now, putting the rook on an open file, opening up like a strong independent woman after a night of drinks. White now play bishop g5, developing. Black plays queen to d6, attacking the bishop and unpinning the knight. And now taking the knight doesn't make too much sense because after you take the bishop, you're attacking this other bishop, you're also attacking c3. And so, well, after the bishop moves, let's say to a4, knight to g4. And this is game over already. You've got double attack over a2, double attack over f2. It's going to be impossible to stop us. Bishop to h4 looks like the only move in this position, but now you play the thematic e3. How beautiful is it to play e3? Or when you're white to play e6. I love those moves. Because it is inevitable that now everything is going to be smashed. White cannot castle because you can, or let's see, oops, mate, in h2. So after pawn takes, queen to h6, boom. You're attacking the bishop, you're attacking this pawn, the rook's attacking this open file. So you see, we gave our opponent the opportunity to use the bishop pair, but for a reason. Because in this type of game, it's really not needed. Bishop g3 saving the bishop doesn't work because queen check, queen blocks, queen to c3 check. And now while moving the king, you're just gonna run into queen a1 anyway. Queen blocks, queen takes, and then king moves, bishop a6 check. I mean, come on, there's no point in continuing here. Checkmate is coming.